It's time for Recipe of the Day. Father's Day is this coming weekend and my dad's birthday is right after, and I will say my dad loves a good steak and he cooks a mean steak as well. I have learned so much of what I know about steak, cooking steak, buying steak, and about meat in general from my dad. If you didn't know, before he and my mom opened their restaurants, he was a federal meat inspector for the Canadian government. And so meat information, meat knowledge, meat conversation was something that was going on around my dinner table when I was growing up, and I soaked it in for sure. So today I am telling you how to cook a steak perfectly. It makes it juicy and tender, and you're going to want to use all of these tips. I know it. So first, what makes a good steak? To me, it has a nicely seared crust, a good seasoning, and it's tender and juicy inside, cooked to your own liking, and that can be anywhere from rare to well done. Even if you like a well done steak, you can make it delicious. I am not really talking about well done steaks today, but I will link to how to cook a delicious well done steak in the show notes, or go to cookthestory.com and search for steak. You will get that and so much more there. But I have some people in my household who like well done steaks, so I have perfected that. Okay, so however you want your steak done, there are some important things to know. First, you want to season it at least 30 minutes before cooking it. Even longer is better. I'm actually going to be telling you how to dry brine steak tomorrow, but I'll link to that in the show notes here as well, or go to cookthestory.com. The short version is season it with a nice layer of salt on both sides, like a thin layer. Put it on a rack in the fridge for 8 hours. 8 hours is the optimum time. I did the side-by-side taste test comparisons, but really minimum 30 minutes, and anything between 30 minutes and 8 hours is only going to make it better. You can add other seasonings when you season it at that time as well. I often will go with garlic powder and some black pepper. I only do the garlic powder if I'm going to be letting it rest for a while in the fridge, because that moistens that garlic powder so that it doesn't burn in the same way when it hits the pan and kind of get bitter. So I only add garlic powder if I'm going to be dry brining it in that way where that seasoning gets moistened. And that is kind of my philosophy with steak for any seasonings that I'm going to add. It is just salt, unless I'm letting it sit for a while so that the seasonings can moisten up a bit. Okay, so you season it 30 minutes before, and you need a really hot sizzling pan, and I'm going to say you are going to finish cooking it in the oven. That is the best. You just get that nice sear in the pan and then a slightly more gentle cook in the oven to finish it off. And the amount of time in the oven depends on how well you want it cooked. But those are the main tips. Season it ahead, use a hot pan, finish in the oven. Okay, now the actual recipe is for 2 16-ounce New York strip steaks that are about 1¼ inches thick. And you can do this with ribeyes though, or really any steak. You just want it to be at least an inch thick for the best steak. It makes a difference. Then you're going to season both sides of those steaks. You're doing a ½ teaspoon per side of the steak. If the steak is thinner or smaller, then you'd want to use less salt. It's just a nice even sprinkling. And then you are possibly putting that in the fridge for a long time, but you are going to pull it out of the fridge 30 minutes before you cook it. If you like your steak medium well or well done, then you want it at room temperature so that it's going to cook more quickly to the middle. In the time that it sears on the outside, you're not going to have it burning on the outside. If you instead prefer your steak to be medium, medium rare, or rare, you are keeping it in the fridge until just before cooking it. I know I've told you this so many times before. This is a myth that people think they're supposed to bring all their steaks to room temperature. It is not true. If you want a really good sear on the outside of your steak and you like your steak rare, then you want it to be cold so that it gets to be in contact with the heat for longer, gets seared for longer before it gets too well done in the middle, okay? So you're taking those steaks out of the fridge depending on how well done you like them, and you are preheating the oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Then, just before cooking the steaks, you're brushing them on both sides with some cooking oil, half a teaspoon on each side of each steak. And you can use olive oil, canola oil, grapeseed oil, whatever you like here. Now, why am I brushing the steaks with the oil instead of putting the oil in the pan? It's because we want a really, 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 really hot pan, and we don't want the oil to burn or smoke before we put the steaks in. This way, the oil and the steak is going in at the same time, and so you don't end up with that smoking oil and the bitterness that can cause. You also get really good contact all across the surface of the steak with the oil, so it's more evenly browning than if you have like a puddle of oil. Some of it would possibly be on more of one bit of steak than another, you see? Okay, so then you're getting a oven-safe skillet, a nice big heavy one, ideally cast iron, and you are putting that over high heat until it is so crazy hot. And then you're putting the oiled and seasoned steaks in there for 2 to 3 minutes on the first side. You really, really want it nice and brown underneath. And then you're flipping it over and doing the other side for another 2 to 3 minutes. I'm just going to say that if there is some nice marbling fat on the outside of your steak, I also just like to take some tongs and put that edge of the steak in contact with the hot pan for a little while, so that it browns a little bit too, because there is nothing as delicious as that browned cooked fat on the outside of a steak, you know? So you're doing just until brown on each side, and then you can also do the edges just to brown them. Then put the steaks on either side into the skillet and put it into the oven just until they reach the temperature that you want the steaks to be, or really actually 5 degrees Fahrenheit below your desired doneness. So if you like your steaks rare, that's 125 degrees Fahrenheit. You're taking them out at 120 degrees Fahrenheit. And I do really think that using a probe thermometer is the best way to go here. So before you even started cooking your steaks, you would stick that probe into the thickest part of one of them. And then it has a digital reader on the outside. So when you transfer the steaks to the oven, you are monitoring that temperature. Okay. So it's 120 is when you're taking it out for rare. So it'll be 125 after it rests, 130 for medium rare, so it's 135 after it rests, 140 for medium, so that it's at 145, and then 145 for medium well, so that it raises up to 150 degrees Fahrenheit, and for well done, you are taking it out at 155, so that it raises up to 160. And I can tell you, just so that you have a general guideline, if you like a medium steak, so you'd be taking it out at 140, it's just about 3 minutes in the oven, so it's not that long. Now, of course, I can't tell you the exact amount of time because it really, really depends on the thickness of your steak and how well done it ended up getting in that pan to start with, right? So use that probe thermometer. It is a great thing to have. And after your steak reaches the temperature that you want, take it out of the oven and transfer it immediately to a cutting board. You do not want it in that hot pan anymore because you want it to stop cooking and kind of settle down, right? Now, I transfer it to a cutting board with a rim or a plate and then put a tablespoon of butter onto each steak, like a pat of butter, even kind of rub it around and let it rest for 5 minutes while the juices sort of settle and stop like moving around inside that steak, so that when you cut into it, they don't just all go running out, but you do get that butter melting in there as well. I will say one thing that I sometimes do is actually put the butter under the steak and kind of move it around on there. And that way the nice crust on the top of the steak isn't getting softened by that butter. It stays a little bit crustier, but that's just a little finicky point. I sometimes do that. Oh, I also have a recipe for an insanely good steak compound butter that has a little special ingredient in it. I will link to that in the show notes for you as well. It is a really nice thing to put over or under your steak or both, or to serve like alongside of it for dipping. Oh, so good. Okay, so you let those steaks rest for 5 minutes with that butter on them, and then you are digging in tender, juicy, delicious steak. Make this one for your dad for Father's Day this weekend. I will put the link to this recipe in the show notes, as well as all the other recipes that I promised that I would link to, or head to cookthestory.com/ROTD and you will get the link to how to cook steak perfectly there. Everything there is arranged by date, so it's helpful to know that today is June 12th of 2025. I'm Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, the all-new chicken cookbook, and from this podcast, recipe of the day. I hope you have a great day. Let's get cooking.